Hello, everybody. This is Zerda with Zerda Media, and I'm back at it again today with a little bit of a new segment, actually. This one we're calling Arcane Analysis. And in this segment, we'll be going over magic theory. And in our first lesson, I'll be going over maximizing your value. Getting right on into it, the first point I'd like to talk about is getting more out of your reactive spells. Now, reactive spells are going to be things that you use in response to something your opponent has done, something like a counterspell or a removal spell. Things that are not reactive spells are things like creatures, that while they can be used defensively, are by their very nature proactive. The first kind of value you can get out of your reactive spells is going to be tempo. Now, I'm not going to dive too deep into what tempo is, but to summarize briefly, tempo is when you use your mana more efficiently than your opponent, or gain some form of on-board advantage that will force your opponent to spend more mana in the future. As you can see here, my opponent has a creature on board, and I also have a creature on board. By using my removal spell on their creature, even though that creature isn't really that threatening, I'm able to get into for more damage and speed up the game, thus gaining a tempo advantage. For another example, to show a way to use your removal to counter tempo, as you can see, I have no creature on board and my opponent has a creature on board. By using my removal spell, I'm able to set back their game plan, thus denying them tempo or giving them negative tempo. The next way you can get value out of your reactive spells is by using them to generate card advantage. This is a more traditional term for value, and as such probably something you're more familiar with. Take the Noble board wipe, for example. As you can see, my opponent has quite a few creatures in play here, but by utilizing a single board wipe, I'm able to remove all of them from the field, thus generating card advantage. Another way to do this, although a lot less flashy, is by using spot removal to generate card advantage. Take this Doomblade in my hand, for example. When my opponent goes to block my creature with both of their creatures to kill it, I'm able to use my removal spell to kill both of their creatures, even though before I would have lost one creature and they would have lost one creature. By using the removal spell, I was able to generate card advantage. This is another way to get value out of your spells. The last way I will be covering today to get extra value out of your reactive spells is by using them to swing the advantage in the game. Now, what I mean by advantage is basically just who is currently winning the game and who has a better setup or board presence. Take this field, for example. As you can see, I have quite a bit of a decent board state. However, my opponent has a creature that's quite problematic and is definitely swinging this in their favor. By using a removal spell on it instead of, say, a lesser creature earlier in the game, I'm able to swing the advantage of the game and continue my push towards victory. The next kind of value I'd like to go over, I like to call informational value. This is basically just understanding what your opponent has access to, what things are likely to be in their hand, or what your opponent's current goals in the game are. Or even simply misleading your opponent as to what you have. After all, information is a very important part of the game. Now, the first kind of way you can get informational advantage is by utilizing the bait spell. While typically this is only used to refer to counterspells and casting a weaker spell first, it can also be applied to removal spells. For example, as you can see, I have a high impact spell and a mid impact spell. By casting the spell of mid-level impact first, I'm able to draw out any kind of counter or removal that my opponent might have, and protect, in a sense, my more important spell. I could even pressure them with said mid-level spell, potentially leading them to losing to it without ever exposing my more valuable spell. The next way you can gain advantage is by not offering the trade. Now, what I mean by this is take this board state, for example. Me and my opponent both have a creature on board. They are creatures that could pretty easily trade for each other. Now, I have the option to attack in and offer my opponent the trade. If they take it, that would in fact give us a little bit of value. It shows that they value their life total more than they value their creature, or that they value getting our creature off the board more than they value attacking our life total. But that doesn't quite show the entire range of information that can be gained. Assuming that we don't have any real reason to be attacking in, we can simply pass the turn and see what our opponent decides to do. Do they use a removal spell on the creature, showing that they very much value getting in for damage? Do they attack in, showing that they don't mind losing their creature, and potentially revealing that they view their current hand as favorable and likely to win via aggressive action? Or do they do nothing, showing that they either value their life total or value the creature they have in play more than the potential for damage or trading for our creature? If they decide that they value their creature more than damage or trading for our creature, that shows us that that creature is important to their game plan, and we should adjust ours accordingly. The last way I'll go over to gain information out of waiting is seeing how inaction affects their development. Now, take this board state, for example. I have a Wrath in my hand, and my opponent does have quite a few creatures. However, I choose to take no action here, signaling to my opponent that I probably don't have the Wrath. As such, they're likely to deploy a more valuable spell if they feel that it'll help them finish me off before I can draw such a Wrath. Thus, by waiting, I'm able to gain more information about what my opponent has. This is a risky play, however, and should only be done if you're confident that you can take the extra damage and still come out on top, or if you're far enough behind that simply wrathing what they have on board isn't going to be enough of an advantage to overcome what they still have in their hand. The last point I'd like to go over is picking spells that can more easily give you value. Spells fall into three basic categories: reactive, proactive, and adaptive. A reactive spell is a spell you use to answer your opponent's threats. A proactive spell is a spell you play to advance your own game plan. And an adaptive spell is a spell that can be used for either purpose. For my reactive spell example, I'll be using Cryptic Command. This is a spell that can very easily generate value in a number of ways. It can be used to draw a card, to counter a spell, tap your opponent's creatures, or bounce one of their permanents back to their hands, or even one of your own if you play Modern and are familiar with the Mystic Sanctuary loop. Pretty simple. Counter a spell, draw a card. Doing so gains you card advantage and keeps your opponent off of the board. So playing this over something like a Deprive, which can also use Mystic Sanctuary to loop itself, can generate you card advantage and pull you further ahead in the game. For proactive spells, I'm using Lingering Souls as my example. Now, this spell can be used defensively, and is often used so very effectively. It is still a proactive spell, as it creates creatures with which you can attack your opponent. And by definition, creatures that can attack are proactive, even if they are used defensively. Now, this spell is effectively, if both played and flashed back, a 5-mana 4/4 flyer. It is split amongst 4 separate bodies. As such, it can be used in many different ways, and your opponent may have to use multiple removal spells to deal with this one card, thus generating value. However, if you use this spell defensively instead of offensively, you can trade for potentially 4 different creatures, also generating value, potentially a back-breaking amount. As for the adaptive spells, I'll use Bone Crusher Giant as my example. This is a perfect example of an adaptive spell. It is capable of being used both proactively and reactively, and can generate card advantage fairly easily. Notice its first half, Stomp. By using this to kill a creature, it is a reactive spell. By pointing it at your opponent's face, it becomes proactive. And by being cast as a creature, it generates card advantage and is proactive. As such, this spell is adaptive, and it's not very hard to see how it can generate value. Being a 2-for-1, killing a creature, and being played as a 4/3 is a pretty easy way to generate card advantage, and thus value. Oh, there's the bell. Guess I'll see you all next week for more Arcane analysis. If you liked the video, please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm always open to recommendations for future videos, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.